All right, here we are. Ready,
What's up?
ready for some Toledo pauses today.
Yeah, Toledo back in the house. Let's go. Good old can you give the backstory on like the Toledo pause and like or like
I
how
think
that came?
we just speak, or maybe it's me. Well, in the Midwest, we speak more slowly across the board. I feel like we speak in a normal cadence, but when I moved to
Hmm.
Central Jersey, certainly Lori's family, but lots of folks spoke so quickly. Yeah, they'd be sitting around the dinner table, the big family gathering, and I would
Uh-huh.
just be sitting like this going,
Like whoa.
I couldn't even figure out how to get a word in edgewise. And then I would say, and then someone would say, "Wait, Sam has something to say," and I go, "Okay, well." Then they'd all be on the edge of their seat, wait, and they'd say, "Okay, are you gonna say it?" And I say, "Yeah,
Yeah.
give me a second. My head's still spinning, man."
I'm still fixing the whiplash you gave me, like going back and forth.
Yeah,
That's funny. Oh
yeah,
wow. So you noticed
yeah,
that immediately, the speed of
yeah,
the way
yeah,
we're speaking.
yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah, yeah. So Lori calls it the Toledo pause, but
Oh,
that's
Laurie
her.
Laurie labeled that?
Yeah, yeah,
That's hilarious.
yeah. All right,
I
so,
haven't been to the South, so I don't know. But yeah, what's up? What's up?
yeah. All right, so listen. Hey, I want to respond to something that I think Eric Sell said early on. He said, "I have a question to my fellow chatters. Is it just me, or is Sam's presentation to this semester class just really focused, and the students' responses and participation really good?" I think this semester we're just rocking it for some reason. Yeah, I had some really, really good students. Um, I think I upped the Trump, whatever you think of Trump, those of you who don't like him, but for me, I'm loving him, this guy, because he gives me something every day to play around with. So
Mm,
I'm looking for material and thinking about
right.
things. It's just been really, really fascinating.
Hmm.
Um, and it's good, I think, for the students too, because they have to, those who, by the way, the class is, we know a buddy of mine who teaches right after me, he did an assessment of his students and what they thought about the election. And 38% of the students said, "Hey, yeah, I'm happy with the outcome of the election." Um,
Hmm.
like 20% were unhappy, 15% are really angry or sad, and then the rest of the students are just kind of like, yeah, whatever, it doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
if that, to give a sense of what students are thinking, and his
Right.
is a big, huge cross section of the university, just like mine. So,
Hmm.
um, that's where we're at. So if you're watching the videos and you're thinking that, um, oh, Ohio's not in the South, yeah, yeah, it's to the west of us. But we were talking of, before we got on, we were talking about the South too. So I wondered if someone was going to pick that up. Uh,
I didn't.
anyway, the slow Southern draw. Anyway,
Yeah.
it, we uh, for anybody who's watching, you got to be wondering, like, what do students think about the election, and that's kind of,
Hmm.
because people with this idea that students are all on the left, so
Hmm.
it's pretty evenly split. It's
Right.
basically, you can sort of say a third for Trump, a third really completely anti-Trump, and a third in the center going like,
Right.
I'm busy trying to just figure, pay my bills, whatever. So
Like that's one of the like where they're at. They're not really focused on the
yeah,
election. Some of them. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Did,
and I think that that's just so important for people because when you listen to the narrative about education in our schools and um,
hmm.
Trump's now pushing to dissolve the Department of Education at the federal
Right.
level. And when you listen to that narrative, people have the idea that all these students have been brainwashed, and like that's not brainwashing. Brainwashing would be you would get to a college like Penn State, or a big state university. So we kind of, we're not a small liberal arts school to
Mm-hmm.
where, 5% of the students would support Trump, but those are rare. Penn State is pretty much representative of what most universities are in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And to see how it like shakes out in this way, I think that's very, very important. So
What narrative were you saying would make the assumption that students are brainwashed?
well, this is the narrative coming out of the current administration and coming out of the more conservative wing, or just the kind of the Republican Party and that kind of thing. That schools are dominated by Democrats, and they're dominated by leftist instructors, and the leftist instructors, we indoctrinate students and so on. And
Mm.
we're
But that
not
assessment
obviously, yeah, and
is showing otherwise.
yeah, because if we are indoctrinating students, we're not doing a very good job of it. I will
Right.
say that. And and you just see that's been the case across the board. Now, I haven't asked my students, but my guess would be my students. I'm gonna see the same thing. Basically a third, a third, a third. And that's I don't know that's
Mm.
important. So. Now, mind you, I do
Mhm.
think most recently, students who do identify as more conservative, but this poll, by the way, this was an anonymous poll that he did with his students in class, right? And I haven't figured out how to easily do an anonymous poll in Social 19. I can just add a question to the exam, but
Right.
students won't. They won't believe me when I tell them, "Hey, this is anonymous, man. I don't really care what you think." And still some of them will question it, and technically I could get in trouble if I do that, even though I don't
What, like
care.
you do a survey? Like you're
Yeah, I would do a
like
survey. I'd throw an extra question on the exam and just not have it marked. I mean, you're not score it in any way, just an ungraded question, just to get everyone to answer it. Like, what do you think?
mm,
Right? Maybe I'll do
right.
it, and maybe I'll just put an answer, a question on there, or an answer that they can say, hey, I'd rather not answer this question. So maybe I'll do it.
Hmm.
That would be really interesting. Okay, so
Do you
the
do a
point
QR
being,
code instead of, but anyway,
yeah, I could do
I was
that.
gonna say, so,
But when you do that, how students are, man. Like they won't even bother to
they
get their
won't pick.
phone and do the QR code. They just won't. They're just sitting there. They just, so many are checked out. You have to like really just hammer away at them.
Yeah, you have to
Uh,
like a process that's like just way easier. Like they have to do it almost
yeah,
instead of a survey,
yeah,
right? Because they won't pick it up. Hmm.
yeah. So anyway, going back to what you asked about the narrative, there just is this narrative. So, I know what I was going to say. I think Trump most recently, especially with the second Trump administration, um, there is a way in which students who are more conservative feel more open to speak out about it. Like students are going to come in front of my class and say like, yeah, I'm a Trump person, like, and that's not, very few people are going to feel strange about saying that. But if I go back to when Trump first decided to run, so in 2016, or even when he was thinking, yeah, 2016, when the first MAGA hats came out. So this was probably in the late spring of 2015, maybe. No, hang on, late spring of 2016. In that semester, I had a student come into class with a MAGA hat on, and
Right,
a
and it's
red
more of a
MAGA
statement
hat.
at that time, right?
Yeah, it was much more of a statement, but
Mhm.
I called her right up to the front. I'm like, "Hey, what? So tell us about the
She was
hat."
a World in Conversation facilitator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. Okay.
And she
Uh-huh.
was cool, and she's just like, "Yeah, no, I support Trump," and I laid it out, and then that was an unpopular thing back then because, well, first off, most people didn't know who this guy was, so it wasn't really
Right.
such a thing. But
That
um,
was real quick, Sam. That was Taylor, right? I think that
yeah,
was
yeah,
Taylor.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
and so when
Anyways.
she did that, when she sat down, and this was always in in Social 19, it was always like you, anybody with any kind of unpopular opinion could voice the opinion. But when she sat down after talking to me, people gave her a big ovation, the whole class. So even
And
though most people who would have supported this guy would have been much more reluctant to stand up in front of class as opposed to today, but students still gave her an ovation because she stood up and said, "Yeah, this is me. This is what I think." And that, I think, is such a big statement. That's almost 10 years ago, right? It's such an important statement to say that that students have been responding that way for a long time, and B, certainly they've responded that way in Social 18 for a long time, because it was
right.
always a space where you could put out unpopular opinions that you thought were probably going to be unpopular with other people.
Mhm.
So,
And the way
which
she
is
said
cool.
it, I just remember it seemed to be like, you know how some people that are on a side, they can be very like, it can be like with vain in a way. Like for her, it was just like, this is just where I stand. It didn't
Yeah, where I
seem to have
stand.
it's just where I stand, not like with any
Yeah.
vain.
Yeah. And then I had, a lot of other students over anytime any student comes up to the front of the class with with something that kind of swims upstream, or uh,
Mm,
people give ovations all the time, because they're really happy that people will take a a strong position. Now, mind you, um, what's interesting is that if people take a far left position, they'll they will get some applause from students in the class, but they won't get an ovation from basically the entire class,
mm,
because the perception is that done they haven't taken a risk, because the perception is that most people are more liberal, even though
right.
the data are showing us that that's not really the case. Uh, but uh, but the perception is that. So if you stand up in front of class and you give a really like impassioned some little mini monologue about
Mm.
a left leaning idea, you're not going to get an ovation from people.
Yeah, yeah. Because
Really?
like, that's so interesting. It makes me more,
Mhm.
what were you, did I cut you off?
No, no, go ahead.
Okay. I was wondering, do you think people are applauding the risk or applauding the confidence, or
They're
there's some
applauding
type
the
of,
risk. They're applauding the
Mhm.
risk, and they're saying,
They're
"Hey,
aware that
this
it's
is."
a risk.
Yep, but again, that's not really the case now. If someone comes up in front of the class and they talk about Trump, there's not going to get applause,
Because
because
it's already
it's
part
not risky now.
anymore.
You know, yeah.
Right.
Now at this point, it's not.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna. Nobody. Yeah, it's not risky.
Yeah.
They win, like, 38% of the students. Like in my buddy's class are happy with the election. That's just not. It's not risky. So.
What
You
do you
know.
think that feels like a phenomenon to me. Like when we applaud, we're applauding a risk, or like why? Why are we applauding the risk? It's so interesting.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Jeff? That's actually a really good question. I think that let's put that on the list of possible of topics for class. Um, let's put it on a list. Let's have this
Let's
conversation in
go.
class.
Yeah,
This
put
would be
that on the
really good.
list.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, because this is. Let's do it. We'll call it risk. Taking risks. What's a risk for you?
Yes. Our facilitators need to watch that.
Yeah. No, this is good. That'll be really. That'll be really good. Um, I think
Mm.
that'll be cool. Taking risk. Okay, there we go. All
So
right.
many
See.
different types of risks too. Like I was like wondering because that feels like there's like things that are risky that could get like a negative reaction, or
Yeah.
like the risky that's positive. And then there's like I don't know, like a neutral risk. I don't, maybe I'm just coming
Yeah.
up with this right now, but
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, you're right. Well, okay. Well, that'll be. I'm gonna mark that actually too. Uh,
let's go. Okay.
type of risk. Yeah. That'll be that'll be how we'll frame the conversation. Huh. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that makes this Social 19 class so interesting is, for me anyway, and why I keep doing it, is because I'm so fascinated by what people think. Like in yesterday's class, it was so interesting to ask
Mm.
uh, Jake, in that
About
beginning segment, say, like, what do you say to this guy, right? His name's Paul, right? We're going to be Paul, the guy in the stream. What are you going to say to him? And in the end, he said, you know, uh, well, he really didn't have anything to say, which is, very, yeah, what do you say? I don't know.
yeah.
Like,
Are you
I
talking
don't know
about the
what I would say.
segment? Are you talking about the segment when you were like asking Jake about how he felt, or like what does he know about black while
No,
driving?
no, when they were sitting in front of each other, and I said, okay, Jake, now you got to tell Paul, what do you do about the fact that your house just got
The
assessed
appraisal.
for a half million
Right.
dollars less than it should have been, and that, it's clearly was, you've been wronged at some level. Well, he won a court case, so
Right. What I thought was really interesting about that class is when like one thing I noticed that you did, I'm not sure if you were feeling the tension that Jake was feeling when you were asking him if he knows about black while driving. And
yeah,
I don't know if you remember that from yesterday, because he was like
yeah.
he seemed hesitant, like he was like you could tell that he didn't um know what to say or how to say what he wanted to say. But then you
Well, I
immediately
don't
went
think,
over to a black student and you were like, "Do you know
yeah,
about the Congo?
yeah,
Like, do you know about what's going on in the
yeah,
Congo?" To kind
yeah,
of like level like the fact that like we
yeah,
don't know things and it's okay because of like the position that we're in, or just like
yeah,
the
yeah.
experiences we have. That's like that's why we don't know them. Just because. So that was really cool. Like, what made you go? That wasn't a part of your. I might be taking this in a different
No,
direction, but that wasn't a
no.
part
Hey,
of your move,
Marissa,
right?
Marissa, I'm going to respond to you in a second. All right. Uh, yeah, right. Des Moines. That's right. Jake, mortgage salesperson, right? Smooth at delivering the bad news. Yeah, he was great yesterday. When they listen, man, this is what it is. You got, I know I shouldn't laugh at that because, well, look, listen. First off, man, even you just said the thing about the Congo, and I laughed because it's horrific. Actually, they just some news just came out of the Congo right now. It's just unbelievably horrific. But I have to say that if I don't laugh, and Marissa, this is a response to what you just asked about whether I read or watch the news. If I don't laugh, I couldn't keep going. Really. I don't even mean don't know if I could keep going doing the work that I do, but I'm not sure I could just keep living, man. It's
Wow.
so, and I think part of it is that um, I just know things that, over these past 40 years, I've known things and I see things and I know how to know things that are just so deeply disturbing. And I'm always aware of them at all moments. It's not like I can just push it away and pretend it's not happening. It's always with me at every single moment. So if I didn't laugh, sometimes I laugh probably at inappropriate times. Or you'll see, I'm going to have a conversation with my friend Ernso. Jeff and I will. We're going to put this together and make it a class, but uh, in from Haiti. And you've seen her. Have you met Ernso?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So Ernso, he and I we'll be talking about the most wretched stuff in Haiti, but we'll be laughing. I mean, you can't not laugh. Otherwise, you can't keep going. So anyway,
That could be a
uh,
sec.
Maria,
I feel like that could
yeah,
be a class topic too.
yeah,
What is laugh?
yeah.
Like, what is the
How to
essential
survive.
need of
How
laughter?
to
Yeah.
how to survive. Yep.
Mm.
How to survive with what you know. Yep. So anyway, Marissa, the answer is yeah, I do pay attention to the news. I don't do as many deep dives as I used to because I can scan the news pretty quickly and I can put it all into the categories that I need. Spent many years building up the categories to understanding life around the globe so I can read just a couple quick stories and put it together really fast. So I don't need a lot of details. Once in a while, though, I allow myself to go into the details, like um, that just something just happened over in Goma in the Congo at a prison. Um, oh man, I can't even go. I went into the details, like I read the fine details of the story, and it just sometimes, yeah.
Can you brief anything, or is it just
Nah, it's just there was a prison break, and then the rebels came in, the M23 rebels. They came in. They're backed by Rwanda, and they just massacred so many people, and in particular women in this
who were
prison.
trying
They
to
couldn't.
escape?
Yeah, most of the men escaped, but the women did not. And I mean, I just can't. I can't. Like, I just can't hold some of that stuff. So anyway, um, that's my long answer to the question about how I do that. But with Jake, what I knew that I can't, if I'm going to put him on the spot like that, and I didn't do it accidentally. I mean, it was accident because I assumed that he would say, like, yeah, I've heard of driving while black, but I think that he probably hasn't thought about it, which is
Yeah,
like, he's really nice. He's a nice guy. And,
right.
you can be a nice guy and not be particularly up to date on the things that other people feel are really important to them, you know?
Yeah.
Um, that's a thing. So whatever. And so I needed to make that point by going over to the other kid and asking him about Congo and what's going on. This is the Great War of Africa, part 3. And, the number of people who have been I mean, it's millions of people who are being displaced and killed and dying, so millions of people, not just like, a few thousand here and there. So it's, uh, yeah. So that's really important, right? So you're saying, Elijah, like that was important to do that.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
felt like it balanced the
Yeah.
tension, and also and not just that, but made true that um, we're aware of different things based on, our experiences,
Mm.
or what our position is, like our sociological address, just and we're
Well,
aware of different things.
the thing is, nobody's going to feel particularly open to being condemned, right? Like being told that we should do something, we should follow, some issue or something that somebody else feels is that's really important to them, right? I mean, it's fine to have a little bit of that, right? It gives us a chance to we all get challenged, right? So it's good. It's good that people get challenged. Like, Elijah, you should be paying attention to this. Damn it! Like, what kind of human being are you if you're not paying attention to this particular issue? Well, that's a good thing, right? Because that gives you a chance to say, well, wait a minute, why should I be doing that? And that's that, and you grow, and that.
Yeah, yeah. It just to because I know I'm usually asking, but that you make me think about World in Conversation and how as trainers we're really trying to like during debrief, we want the facilitators to feel like they can challenge their co-facilitator or like be
Yeah,
honest,
exactly.
or which is like a different form of challenging because you're like challenging someone to be aware of something. But I guess
Yep.
the idea of just being transparent or saying the thing that might be tough for someone's ears, like even if it's like you need to know this thing or like however it is, like being able to just be transparent in that way. Because if not,
Mhm.
then like the co-facilitators aren't able to be on the same page because they're always afraid to be honest. Like after the dialogue, like, oh, it would have been helpful if you did this, or I didn't like that you did this, or
Mm.
you
Mhm.
know, um,
Yeah, and that's my and that is my and that's what I get from students a lot, they challenge me like, why didn't you say this and why didn't you say that? And and I can almost always have a response, but the truth is, if I don't really listen carefully to what their particular complaint is, I might miss that there's a new narrative happening,
um,
which takes place every 4 or 5 years, right? There's like this kind of underground narrative that's going on, and if I miss that wave, then this is a thing, right? I can't live 20 years in the past, right? So
That's really
So anyway,
cool. Wow, that's really cool, to listen to a complaint and like, what are you listening for, right? It's like, if you
yeah,
really like read between the lines, you're
yeah,
discovering a new
yeah.
narrative. That's interesting.
Yeah, like I'm not listening to the particular complaint of their. Well, sometimes I am because maybe it's like it's worth. I say,
Right.
huh, they really got something. But usually, someone who's 20 years old, it's like it's not. They're not going to give me a deep dive into something that I'm missing. But what they're going to give me is that they're going to fine tune something I'm missing, which is going to be like, hey, it would have been easier to listen to you or listen to that conversation you just had if you'd have said it this other way or if you'd included
Mm.
something. I was like, okay, I get that.
And then that gives you
So
sight to a different pathway of how
yeah,
people are
that's
thinking
right.
about something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hey, so what do we have on the agenda? What do we have any questions? Class 6 questions. This was last last
That was
Thursday.
Thursday. Yep.
Right. Doesn't the government promote special treatment? In 70, I passed the exam for deputy sheriff and scored 110 out of 100 because of a veterans privilege. Yeah, yeah. So listen, Bob. Yeah, but in the that was really big in the mid to the 70s up through the 80s, for veterans for sure. We tried to do it. Different people did it for different groups, including for women, for people of color. It might have been like Spanish speakers, like out in LA for a while. I think the police exam, if you could speak Spanish, um, you got some points because they needed Spanish speakers. Man, they really really needed people who could speak the language, right? And you got to admit that, like, come on, when you break it down into these tiny individual examples, that of course it makes sense. Imagine, not having Spanish speaking police on the police force in Miami. You know what I mean? So
Right.
anyway, the point being, today it's a very different story, right? But back, if you go back 40 years, it's a little bit different. So yeah, we were doing that, and maybe in some places, a few places, we still are, but mostly the courts have decided that that kind of thing is not kosher anymore. So anyway, yeah, that was a that was a thing. Yeah.
Marissa just posted a question that I just felt, I don't know, I feel like you'd be able to respond to that. How do we survive 4 years of Trump?
Oh yeah. Well, I'll tell you how. First off, you laugh a lot. If you really don't, if you like Trump, then it's going to be great. You're just going to ride the wave into liking him. But even then, you're going to have to deal with a lot of the really just the statements, man. You're gonna have to hold in your head, like, he made this statement about Gaza, right? I propose that we move all the Palestinians out of Gaza and we turn it into the Riviera in the Middle East, right? I mean, the a human being saying that, like, just saying we're gonna move everybody out, especially when you think of Palestinians in land, and like you just would never ever 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 say that. You'd find some other way to do it. So the fact that Trump said it, he just says these things, they just come out of his mind. You know what I mean? I don't even know where they come in, and then they come out of his mouth, and think like, dude, wait, what? So anyway, you have to, even if you like Trump, okay, then you got to deal with the whiplash. This is like the Toledo, the Toledo Pause guy, and having a conversation around a dinner table in Central Jersey. Just like, oh my God, you're speaking too fast. So you got to deal with that. But you just keep looking for the ways in which Trump is going to shake some things up. Okay. And we need, it's good to shake things up. Okay. Now it may be, so this, Marissa, I'm speaking directly to you. Okay. So I'm assuming you don't like Trump, or given the way you just asked the question. Okay. So, um, but shaking systems up is a good thing. Shaking them up too much is not a good thing. You know, I've said before, like I'm kind of nearing the last. I'm in the last third of my life, and I don't want a lot of shaking up. Like I want a smooth landing. So like, but
When
um,
when you
so
say
let me. I'll give you. No, hang on. I'll give you an. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say when you say shake things up, what are you thinking about, or like what are you seeing, like in the context of like abolishing certain policies or like
Yeah,
saying
like when you
things, or
say
what
that we're
is?
gonna, yeah, we're gonna abolish the Department of Education. It's like, well, no matter how you think about that, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not like saying we're gonna we're gonna end the DEI unit inside the Department of Education. We're gonna abolish the whole thing. And it's like, oh, dang, okay, man, that's like that. Okay, this is big. All right, so
Would you also go ahead? Would you
okay,
also say
so
like the Palestine thing is like what he wants to do, but that's also shaking things up?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
those
yeah.
are
But here, let me
that's
just tell you something that I heard. I was listening to the BBC this morning, and I'm listening to them. They're talking about it, and they're talking about people from, leaders and people, from Germany and France and the UK and the Middle East and the Emirates and the Saudis and the Egyptians and the Turks and just different folks. They're kind of reporting on. And now, of course, everybody. So Trump says everyone loves my proposal, and not a single person
which
loves his
proposal?
proposal except his proposal to take over Gaza and build the Middle East Riviera. Except some of the right wing parties in Israel, right? But here's the thing. Uh, so he doesn't make it easier because he's saying like, yeah, everybody loves it. It's like, dude, I don't. What news are you listening to? Or if people calling you on the secret hotline, going like, listen, I'm going to publicly say I hate this thing, but I want you to know that I really love it. That's probably not happening. So it's just him being him, right? But what I heard between the lines as I'm listening to folks, and Marissa, this I'm speaking to you, right? Is and I've been thinking about Gaza for 40 years, right? So like I came of age, when I was an undergrad. So this is over 40 years ago. Uh, one of my main professors was Palestinian from the West Bank, but had also family in Gaza, although it was different 40 years ago, right? But so I was learning all about the West Bank, and then another one of my professors was from Israel. So I was learning, I was in the middle of it. Anyway, so I've been thinking about this a long time. But what I heard in between the lines is people saying like this is the craziest, stupidest thing in the world. Okay, but between the lines was, but now we're gonna have, but we now we got to do something because we have to stop Trump, right? Meaning like now we're gonna have to solve the problem. And like so, what Trump did, so what he did. So Marissa, think about this, right? Isn't it wild that in a way, like Trump comes in and he proposes this thing, and he's being like, he's being Trump. He's being, just, I don't know where he gets these ideas, right? But, but suddenly people are going like, oh shit. Okay, now we got to really address this because no one wants to think about Gaza. No one wants to talk about Gaza. It's too politically unsavory at every level. Who's going to come up with the billions of dollars to rebuild Gaza on top of the billions of dollars that they would have needed anyway, just to make Gaza make it a thriving economy? And
Oh, so
so
nobody wants to think about the solution for Gaza.
no,
Is that what
nobody.
you
They just want
said?
to critique. Yeah, everybody wants to critique, but hands off. And all the state, the Gulf states, they're all in this way. But everybody's got deals going on, so they're like, it's all about money, man. It is about money. Let's be very clear about that. And whether it's the Qataris or the Omanis or Kuwaitis or the Emiratis, the Saudis, doesn't matter. Uh, so. Uh, but isn't that? But I just heard between the lines. Okay, now we're gonna have to step. We're gonna have to do something, including the Europeans, right? So I'm like, okay. So Marissa, you say, how are we gonna survive 4 years of Trump? I'm gonna keep looking for the. I'm gonna have to deal with the whiplash that I get when I hear things, certain proposals or whatever, right? Because it's just like, again, I it's not what I want a real nice soft landing, but at the same time, I'm gonna, you just stir things up, man.
Mhm.
So uh, there it is. And that's me. That's how I look. I'm constantly seeing the glass half full, no matter what. I have to at this because it just goes back, Elijah, to what I was saying earlier about like I know too much.
Mm.
I can't hold the darkness. I can't. So I have to go to the glass half full as opposed to half empty, man, and be the optimist. I have to be,
Mhm.
or else I can't survive. So
Mhm. Not to bring
yeah.
you back to the darkness, but like what are you like foreseeing with like what he wants to do, and why do you think he wants to do that? Like go into to
No,
Gaza.
I don't think he's thought it through any more than just who God knows what, right? Honest to God, right?
Right.
And
Uh,
yeah, in J39, we've already survived 4 years, so-called survived 4 years. Hey, we didn't survive. We got through. It was 4 years. It was fine, and mostly it'll be fine here. Uh,
mhm.
but I think, you know, um, eh, in the Musk thing, Musk, yeah, but Possum Jesus, Musk isn't going to be around very long, man. Those two are they're already butting heads. They're gonna butt heads pretty hard, and Musk will be gone. So don't worry about him. That's my take on it. And I would bet a
How are
lot
they
that
butting
I'm.
heads? What do you what do you know?
Because they're two big idea people and they have two big personalities, and neither of them can survive being in the shadow of the other one, and they can't be equal. Yeah. So Muss is, yeah. So that's like what it is.
And
Yeah.
there's already ideas that they're butting heads on.
Yeah, there's already stuff, man. Musk making statements that haven't been vetted by the Trump team, and the Trump team's already battling it out with each other. And like, you can't, you're going to have that. I mean, that's just going to be, it's just what it's going to be. Um, but, because there are too many things. There are too many big proposals, right? You didn't hear, go back to Obama in 2008, or well, 2009, when he, first moved into the White House. There was nothing for months, it was very calm, everybody was on the same page. Everybody, there's none of this kind of stuff, man.
Right. I,
And they had they ran a really tight ship. But Trump doesn't run a tight ship, man. That's not what it is.
yeah, I wonder
So
how they deal with conflict within their like cabinet or their team.
well, from what I understand, from what I've learned in talking to people, and I know, some people who know Trump and going back to Musk, know Musk also, and know them both, and is also very, very clear that that relationship, that marriage will end in divorce pretty quickly. Uh, but I think that they just deal with the conflict, man. And a lot of people will come and go. That's what it is. Just in the first Trump administration, lots and lots of people coming and going.
So conflict is
Yeah.
dealt with by excluding individuals or like letting individuals go
Yeah.
rather than like like mind melding or
Yeah. Yeah. Because
it's just like
you
you
can't.
go.
Yeah, because you look, you can't get, you have to, when you work in a group like that, you've got to get everybody on the same page, man. And it's really difficult to do that when you have some big personalities. Like you just, man, it's so difficult. And by the way, J39, I don't think Vance is going to be the next leader of the GOP, because Vance won't be able to get out from under the shadow of Trump. No matter what happens, he won't be able to get out of that shadow. And so it's going to have to be somebody else. Vance doesn't have he doesn't cast a big light. And he can't cast a big light, because if he did, Trump wouldn't have picked him, and Trump won't let him cast a big light, right? So because he can't, I mean, that's not a criticism of Trump. It's just because he can't do that. It's not who he is. So Vance will not be able to do that, and pretty quickly, I don't think anyone's gonna accept that. So anyway, that's my thinking. Wait, what else do we have from class? Any other questions? God, I don't know to talk about Trump. Can a policy overcome human behavior? Whoa, damn.
It's an
Can a
interesting question.
policy overcome? I don't know what you mean by that.
Yeah, I'm
Can
trying to break it in a policy overcome human behavior.
in order for me to
Like,
respond to
like
that
can human
question,
behavior not go around policy? Like, I don't know. I'm trying.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
So,
DEI policy. Gonna probably no. Uh, well, yeah, you can because you tell people here, for example, let's look at what I talked about in class yesterday, right? So we know there's discrimination in housing, right? So we just do. There's discrimination everywhere. The question isn't does it exist ever. It's how much does it exist? It's less than it was in the past. Everywhere you turn, there's less discrimination than the past. Okay, that's really important. Um, and it's not a matter of whether it exists, it's a matter of how much still. And so we know there's discrimination in housing. And again, Elijah, in the class, I was talking about those tester studies, right? It's the best way to
mhm.
measure discrimination. You and someone who's just like you, but as a woman, and everything is the same. And you go and you do these things. You apply for a job and see how they treat you, and then we see how they treat her. You know, and these kinds of and we watch it and we're studying some particular thing and we try to hold constant as many parts of your behavior as possible so that if there's a difference we can ascribe that different treatment to the fact that you're a man and she's a woman. Like we need to be able to do that. If we can't do that, then there's no sense in doing
Are you saying
anything,
like
right?
discriminatory or inclusive behavior? Like
Yeah,
measuring
somehow.
those two different types of
Yeah.
behavior?
And so when we do those kinds of studies, we see differences. But again, the question is how much, right?
Mhm.
Well, so we know there's discrimination in housing. The most recent study was actually with gay and lesbian couples versus straight couples. And
Wow.
they did these tester studies and they just saw that people treated gay and lesbian couples differently, not to a great degree. It wasn't off the scale, meaning that if you're gay and lesbian, you can't walk around saying, I get treated differently all the time, everywhere, always, and everything. Every time feel like discriminated against somehow, it was discrimination. No, but it's enough to say, yeah, this is not a good thing. And none of us want to be in that. We don't want to live in that world, right? You
Right.
know what I mean? Who wants to
Mm.
live in, none of us want to live in a world with discrimination. We want to believe that our neighbors are going to be treated equal to us, right? And that's a uniquely American quality. Even though we've lived in this world with so much unequal behavior and Jim Crow and so on, but still, these days, the vast majority of us want to believe that we're treated fairly. And so, okay,
And
so
with the quick question, does was it
yeah,
ex with the gay and lesbian couples in terms of
yeah,
the housing market, was it exclusive to like income bracket? Was it like if you're in a high
yeah, yeah,
class,
yeah,
or
yeah.
was it like
No, I don't know that. No, I don't know that. What they did with this one particular study was just middle
got
income
it?
couples.
Oh wow,
Okay.
so middle income, and they were
Yeah.
seeing that with middle income.
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't poor people and
Wow.
it wasn't really rich people. They weren't looking at $10 million homes kind
Okay,
of thing.
because
That
I was
probably
making
wouldn't
this.
matter. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
right.
Middle income couples, where most people are, right? In the bell curve, right there in the center. So
Yeah.
anyway, so now we know there's a degree of discrimination. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? Well, one thing you got to make housing assessors and real estate agents and rental agents, that kind of stuff. You got to make them aware of that, so that if they have any subconscious biases, that they can look at those and do the best they can to say like, oh man, yeah, let me make sure that I don't even know that I'm treating these two couples differently, right? I have no idea. They speak, it's as a couple coming from India, right? And but they're buying a house and they're new to the community and they're buying a house and so they're coming from India. Like I don't even realize that I treated them differently than this other couple who's coming from Michigan right into my community, right? I don't even know that. And most discrimination happens in that way. It's not conscious, it's not deliberate, it's just
Implicit
subconscious.
bias. Yeah.
Implicit bias. And again, that's why it's not so huge because if it were intentional, we would see so much more discrimination because people would really be trying to discriminate. But that doesn't mean that it's not a problem, right?
Right.
Well, sometimes when it's a tiny little bit, it's not really a problem because it's a tiny little bit. Like, come on, man, there's gonna be something. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't. Okay,
Is
so
that what makes it like more insidious, like implicit by, or
I
because
think
what
so.
is it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Okay.
so because you don't know it and no one knows it. And so we're all just okay, but none of us want that. If you ask the average human being, "Hey, you have this implicit bias against X group of people and, like short people over tall people. You treat them differently. Let's say that you're like flight attendants, right? Yeah, we see this with flight attendants. Well, the vast majority of flight attendants are going to say, "Oh, really? First off, they're gonna say, "Oh, no, I don't." Like, come on, because like, of course I don't. Like, why would I treat tall people differently than short people, right? And they say, "No, listen, you probably do because we see this across the board, so you probably do." And then
Interesting.
most people are gonna say, "Oh, well, tell me about that because I want to like tell me about that." Like, what do you mean? Like, I want to learn. I want to fix that, right? Because we want to fix
Really?
it.
You feel like they'd be more like interested in, rather than denying, it'd be, you think they'd be open
Well,
to,
we're all gonna deny first,
yeah, okay, but
I
then,
deny when someone tells me, "Listen, you have a bias against something." I'm like, "Dude, I don't have a bias against anybody, man. Come on, I'm Sam." You know what I mean? He's like, "No, you do. Here, let me point it out." I'm like, "Damn!" Then my ears perk up. Like, tell me exactly where it is and how it is, because I want to know this. This is
yeah,
wild. Okay,
hmm,
how do I develop that? Like, damn. Okay, so
humility, or how,
yeah,
because that sounds like
how they
humility, right?
develop that
Or,
bias. How they develop the
oh, oh,
bias
oh,
against a certain group, like,
got
oh,
it.
damn, like, okay, right? So
It,
now we know there's this bias in the housing among home assessors and real estate agents and so on. Again, not everybody, but we see it in the industry, right? So it's like, okay, well, what are we gonna do about that? Well, if we get rid of DE and I, well, so first off, what are we gonna do about it? Well, one way we're not gonna fix it is to get rid of all conversation about it, right? If we stop doing research about it, if we no longer have workshops that, when we have these big conventions on for real estate agents or home assessors, because there's like people who do assessing, they go to conferences. Not everybody goes, but they're national conferences or regional conferences, all this kind of stuff. They're conferences for everybody. So at these conferences, there's a big session on, implicit bias. Well, we don't have those sessions anymore because DE&I stuff have told us like, yeah, you can't do that, or we don't do that, or that's not important, or there's none, it's like, okay, well, that's one way we're never going to fix the problem. Now we're for sure, or now we're never going to fix it because we don't have any way to fix it.
uh-huh.
So this is so going back then to the
It,
question that was up on the screen. It's like, well, we're only going to fix stuff to the degree to which somebody's going to be willing to even look at it,
yeah.
that we know
And,
about it.
and I'm not sure if if this is even a talking point or it just might be mute, but also think about, I guess when I went to this specific conference in State College, that DJ had some of the staff at World in Conversation go to. I think it was like, um, I forget what it was, but it was like a conference. And
Hmm.
what I'm noticing, like, what's the effectiveness of like how people facilitate these conferences, to like really make it feel like impactful and meaningful versus it just being a thing that people go to and then it just goes through one ear and out the other. Or, but I said that might be a mute point, but I'm just like, I feel like the effectiveness of how we facilitate these things, um, versus like if someone's in the audience and one person's talking and they're like, okay, do a small group, but then people weren't
Yeah.
really talking, and it's like,
Yeah.
did you really
Yeah.
get anything out of the, the conference that you should have gotten? Just,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
but
how else yeah. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But the point being,
you
how do
just need
we
to have the
fix it?
conversation. Is
Yeah, you got to have some kind of
Yeah,
conversation, right? But
I was just
but
thinking the second level of that is like have it, but
yeah, no, the
how are we
second
having
level.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
how do you have the conversation? Right. It's like not just do a session on implicit bias, but you would need a good presenter. I will be pretty certain that if I did a presentation at a big conference for 1,000 people about implicit bias in the
Uh-huh.
real estate market, you're all real estate agents. Let me have a conversation with you, a come to Jesus moment with you, and talk about this a little bit. I would venture to guess that most people would hear what I had to say. Yeah. Now,
Okay, cool.
I think people be pretty open to what I have to say because I know how to say it. But you could have another
Mhm.
person that would come, put PowerPoint slides up, and people would be sleeping, like,
Yeah, right, yeah.
yeah,
Which is so
yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah.
It's, at
Yeah,
least it's
well,
being had. That's
that's what it is, though. And you know what I mean? Do we have any
so,
other questions, or what
yeah.
other questions do we have? That was a really hilarious comment by uh, given that diversity by definition includes everything, wouldn't mandates with any specificity actually be excluded? Yeah, they would be. Yeah. Yeah, you are right. But that's but in truth, this is one of those questions that you ask when you take a hit off a joint. You like, and then you ask that you ask that question right there. It's like, yeah, it would be, but well, this is part of the problem with diversity. It just gets chopped up into 1,000 little pieces, and it's like I don't even know what we're talking about anymore, you know. Also, in a world like the United States, where we are so diverse in terms of ideas and so many things, man. We are just so diverse. But what happens is the conversation about diversity sometimes gets out ahead of the reality. Hey, by the way, Elijah, for
What do you
example,
mean by that?
how
Yeah,
many
go ahead.
how many NCAA athletes are there in the United States?
Like millions? Or like 100, like
Yeah.
a million? I don't
How,
know. Like
how many?
maybe
Well,
hundreds of thousands? Maybe
maybe
hundreds
a
of
hundred.
thousands.
Maybe
Because there's so many college, like D1,
somewhere
D2,
between
D3,
50 and 100. There's so many little colleges, right? Dude, there's
and then
200,
there's so many different
200 schools in
sports.
Pennsylvania alone. Maybe somewhere between 50 and 100,000.
That's it?
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
I
Can
don't know. I
someone
feel
look
like
it up, by the way, right now? Someone on
yes,
the
I'm about to
stream,
look
look
it
that
up.
up. All right. 30,000? 30,000 NCAA athletes. Okay. Kenny.
That's what it
Yeah.
is?
Oh, just a guess. All right. Now, someone look it up. Okay. Elijah, how many how many of them, wait, okay, whoa, 522,000. Whoa. Okay, there we go. 522,000. All right.
Wow.
Elijah, how many tr- athletes of these athletes, how many were born of one sex but compete of another sex? How many were born
Many
male
do I
but
think?
compete as females, and
Mm,
how many were born females but compete as males?
maybe like
How many of these 500,000?
maybe like 500 or like 200, maybe like 100. I'd rather get smaller. Yeah.
Keep going.
Like like
Keep going.
30,
10.
10.
10. So
Okay.
Trump,
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
Donald Trump just he signed today. I think it was today. He signed this thing about athletes. It's not, you're not allowed to, the NCAA that they're, yeah. So you can, uh, so in the NCAA, new bylaws, they have to adopt these that if you were born male, you can't compete as a female, and if you were born as a woman, you can't compete as a man. How about that? Born
Right.
as a man, you can't compete as woman, man. For
Yep.
10 people. Now, what happens is we have a big, huge conversation about these kinds of things, right?
Hmm.
And it's because everyone's having the conversation. It seems like it's a big, huge thing. It's like, oh my God, these athletes are everywhere. It's like, oh God, and then and
Seriously.
that's what goes on. We lose our minds over this stuff. And we're an incredibly diverse nation, but sometimes our diversity leads us down these rabbit holes of conversations about things that we really have no business talking about.
Mm.
This was not
Because it's
for
not as
public.
significant, you're saying,
It's not
because
for
of the.
public consumption. Yeah,
Mm.
it's not. We're not going to make
Oh,
a good decision if it's a public conversation,
what does the
right?
variable of adding the public in do to the conversation?
Because it means that people can't make adjustments in the ways that they need to make adjustments. Okay.
Because
This
there's
includes this includes athletes who at the age of 5 or 10, 5 or 6 or 7 transitioned. Now, these aren't just people who they got through their junior year of college competing as a man,
these
and then
10.
decided, yeah, these 10, right? So this includes people who transitioned at a really, really young age. You know what I
Got
mean?
it.
That this is
Uh,
not who started the transition process. So the point being,
right,
when you have a public conversation about this, it means that it becomes politicized, that it's about who has the most power to demand that whatever they're thinking becomes the thinking of everybody else, right?
right.
And
Without
what goes on, and with this particular issue, is that doctors, people in the NCAA, yeah. So people, yeah, yeah. Okay. That's over the past 10 years. So I'm looking at who it is. Yeah. So
Mm.
now this is, but people have been really working to figure this out. Like, how do we figure out, how do we make this work? How is it, how do we, what's fair? What's not fair? Like, these aren't people who are radical, uh, on one thinking on one side of the spectrum, or radical thinking on the other side of the spectrum. These are people you have to trust. You really have to trust that these are really thoughtful people, right?
like
So
these
it's like,
policymakers, the as
yeah,
opposed
like
to these
we're,
people.
yeah. So we get the doctors who are, people who are doing this work, the researchers and stuff. Like, okay, so we're going to give, women testosterone, right? And we have to take away testosterone from men because they have to compete evenly with women, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
so the women who were born as men are going to compete unequally with women. So we're going to have to reduce testosterone in them to try to figure out what would be a fair measure, fair assessment, right? And
Right.
so we're going to keep like adjusting and try to work it. And so years and years and years, people have been doing this. Like, okay, let's try to get it right. But
Right.
when it becomes a public conversation, that's no longer possible. And so, and
Because
then
then it
we
just becomes about the narrative
it's
rather
about the
than.
narrative. Yeah. And I'm not saying people always get it right, but we don't trust in this society. We are quickly losing our trust in experts. We don't believe anybody. So like the COVID
Right.
happens, and it's like people have
Oh,
been studying this. Like
like
when COVID started. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, no. When you just said Cove, it made me think of the guy who was getting a bunch of heat. I forget his name. The guy.
Fauci?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
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 That's what it made me think of. Like people are
Yeah.
not being
Well,
trusted. It's making me think about
yeah,
Fauci.
like not trusted, and it's like, yeah, it's like but anyway, chicken pork adobo. So since it's 10, is it acceptable is a really, really good question. N- n- uh, what the 10 indicates is that we have over 500,000 athletes. So Trump signs this law, right? And he there's a big thing, and he signs it, and it's like, okay. But if you ask people, it's like they think it's a much bigger issue than it is. Okay, that's never a good thing. You don't want extreme thinking ever. You don't want the whole world to think, if I let my kid go out in the front yard and play in the driveway, they're liable to get kidnapped, because kidnappings are happening everywhere, as opposed to the chances of them being struck by lightning in the middle of a sunny day is greater than them being kidnapped by a stranger. Okay. But you don't want that kind of thinking. It just creates divisions in communities and in societies. It's never what we want. So yeah, so 10 does
Interesting.
matter, right?
It's
Now,
interesting.
if those 10, well, anyway, no. So let me go back up to Ian Doherty, right? Does the 10 win medals? No, because some of them are people who transition from F to M. And like if you're transitioning F to M, you're not competing against men. And anyway, if it's a sport that requires strength at all, you're not going to be winning any medals. You're just transitioning. Um, so anyway, I'm not. I think the problem isn't the number of athletes. The problem is the impact on that type of thinking that affects transition. Yeah, I would say that. I would say, and then what
What's
we
that
do is
type of thinking?
because
This
the type of thinking is extremist thinking. Like this is such a huge problem in society. Like, oh my God, we've lost our way. We have like this is just taking us down this path, and like, oh my God, it's the end of life as we know it, kind of stuff, right?
right,
Um,
right. Which is the public, what your point to the
yeah.
publicizing or getting feedback from the public in a way that
Yeah, and I think Michael's there's the comment talking about these. It pushes more important issues to the sideline. Yeah, right, right. Talk about household wealth distribution. Talk about, you know, yeah, talk about that. How about it? So yeah, I mean, there's so many things, right? So for me, I think
Mhm.
what I try to say all the time um, is so, hey, green-eyed lady, let me say let me just respond to your thing about men not being allowed inside the private spaces of females. Um, I told this story a few weeks ago when I was in Vietnam. Uh, I went to a bathroom. First off, in it's quite true in Europe, but it's definitely true in Asia. It's certainly true in Korea. It's true
What
I
is
see in Japan is that you go in a bathroom and the doors to the stalls go all the way to the ceiling. It's not like you don't see people's feet and their heads in the door. You go into a stall, it's like it's you're in the stall, man. There's that
what
you're in
about
a
the
box.
bottom? What about the bottom?
No, it's all covered. Everything's covered. Everything. Yeah, it's just
Really?
floor to
Wow.
ceiling, man. Floor to ceiling.
Wow.
So I went into this bathroom and it was a multi-gender bathroom. And I walked in and I'm just like, whoa, all right. I walk in and a woman comes out of the stall. And I went, whoa, but she didn't even pay attention to me at all. So I immediately thought, oh wait, I went in the wrong bathroom, right? But she just looked at me and walked past me. And she was Vietnamese, right?
Right, like she was
So I went
unbothered.
so I very quickly said, I'm not in the wrong place. I took I speak slowly, but my brain works fast mostly, right? So I said, all right, I'm in the right place. So I go in the stall, um, and I did do my thing, and there were no urinals. It was only stalls, right? So I
Uh,
went in and I took a leak, urinating, and came out, and there was two women at the mirror, like it's like doing one was doing her hair, and the other one was talking, and they did washing her hands, talking, and I
uh,
washed my hands right next to her, and it was
uh,
perfectly fine. So, green-eyed lady, the reason I'm telling you that story is, I think if you were in that bathroom with me, and if the first time you'd be shocked, you would have been shocked if we were in Hanoi in Vietnam. And I've been in many bathrooms like this, over the years. The first moment you'd have been shocked, but the second time you'd have been much less shocked. And the third time it would just be normal and there you'd be. And it just would be a non-issue. I was up
in
in Toronto and I had a very similar experience. So
in oh, so in Toronto too?
yeah, yeah, Canadians. We're here on campus. Go over to the engineering building. I mean, to Sackett building. Well, now you can't because they're doing renovations. But there's a multi-gender bathroom. It's a big bathroom. You go in there. There are urinals. There are stalls. Men and women go in there. I
On
was there.
campus
I
here?
was there. Yeah, yeah, right on Sackett. I was there with
What?
Lori and I went. when we were walking home a couple years ago, and she went into the bathroom, and I was waiting outside, and this guy came out, and I went, like, "Wait, what?" And then,
Yeah.
Lori came out right after her, and
Did
and then
she
I looked
say?
at it, and then, well, I saw it was, oh, it's a multi-gender bathroom or whatever. And then, okay, Lori came out after, and she said, "Wow, that would kind of freak me out at first."
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then she said, "Yeah, but a guy could walk into a woman's bathroom at any moment. Why is that weird? Like, anybody can walk into a woman's bath. Why do I feel unsafe if a guy's in there? Because a guy could walk in at any moment." And I'm like,
Right.
"Yeah,
Like it
right."
changed her like her thinking. Like she
Yeah,
after that
and so,
experience.
ironically, if we had bathrooms that were for men and women, then they would be, this is my thinking as a sociologist, maybe I'm wrong,
Uh-huh.
but
Uh-huh.
like in Toronto or like in Vietnam or like in Korea, they would be, not all bathrooms, right? I'm just talking about some where I've been. They would be, you have men and women coming and going.
Yeah,
That's if
yeah.
you're, like,
It makes
if you're concerned about attacks by men or something, right? Well,
right,
most men are not concerned about being attacked by a woman, right? Let's
right.
be clear, and they have good reason to not be. And
Uh,
women have, are concerned about, violence from men, right? Even though that the risk of violence is still very small, right? But nonetheless, that's a concern. And
yeah.
but if you
That
were in bathrooms where men and women are coming and going, it's like, okay, well, then the risk kind of would go away.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
That that makes me think about like the I don't know. That makes me think about like the culture of like sexualization and
Yeah,
how because the first thing I was gonna ask you when you were in Vietnam before this, I was gonna be like, oh, what's like the culture or the norms of or like
yeah,
the amount of like assault that happens or like the because you know how like I was thinking about I think it's called reactance theory where
yeah,
like if you're restricted of things, you want things more. Like, like for parents, like if you're grounding, always grounding your kids or like whatever, your kids are eventually gonna like you want something because you're restricted of it, like there's more desire
yeah,
because you can't have it, kind of thing, or
yeah,
like
yeah,
because there's restriction.
yeah,
And like if you're normalizing something, it makes me wonder if it like neutralizes like desire or the act
yeah,
of doing things that are
yeah, for
um
sure. Yeah, for sure.
interesting.
Yeah,
Huh.
I think that, yeah, I'm the, hey, and cognitive dissonance, your comments about gender, um, yeah, it is funny, right? Sex, with sex, what we're referring to is our biological foundation of self regarding, male, female, right? And then anything in between, right? That's what we're talking about, like our biology. And with gender, it's just all the sociology that we attach to it, the meaning we attach to it. So, when women first started wearing pants, and they were just like, that was you, the way men tried to shame women into stop not wearing pants was to say, so you're a man if you wear pants, you become a man. Well, they just took a clothing, which is just this cultural artifact, and attach it to men. And then that, in the world of sociology, we start to have to talk about, we want to have a conversation about that. And so we came up with these terms of gender, um, and which is cool. It makes a lot of sense. And then we genderize, like having earrings, right? That's like when I first had my very first earring, which was this one here, uh, back in 1978. I was not a lot of men had earrings, man. I mean,
Did
it
you only
was.
have one, too, or did you have two at the
I
time?
only had one back
And
then. I
that's
got
even
one. Yeah,
was the idea that if you wear one, it's like a signifier of like being homosexual or like being gay.
no.
Was that
No,
around at that time?
if you wore it in your right ear, then that was seen as a signifier. But that was only true in certain areas, I think. It
Okay.
really wasn't. It didn't seem like, no. There were so few men that had earrings. I don't think it much mattered. But I nonetheless
Yeah.
followed that idea and got my first earring in my, um
Left.
in my left ear. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay.
Hang on, green-eyed lady. If I had a teenage daughter what would I think about if my teenage daughter was forced to use a multi-gender bathroom? Well, I think, again, I'm always, me, green-eyed lady, I'm just always trying to open my mind as far as I possibly can. And I'm trying to just see what all of the possibilities are. If I had a teenage daughter in this environment right now, my teenage daughter most likely, would have no issues whatsoever because you just grow up thinking about this differently. Um, yeah, and of course it depends on the bathroom, right? I mean, it completely depends on the one in the Sackett building. The reason that was so weird is because you had your urinals there. So like Lori's getting, she's washing her hands, and in the mirror behind her is some guy who's like standing like this. It's just like, whoa, that just was weird. But we're in the bathroom, in Toronto and in Vietnam. I have no idea. There are doors. People are doing something behind doors. They're going to the bathroom, and so therefore, I don't like. Yeah. So therefore, it's not weird at all. And so, green-eyed lady, I would guess if I had a teenage daughter, certainly I probably would be much more normal than it would be, for me, right? Okay, Patrick Olcott. Uh, Let me see here. This question: have I seen any research on how most of the issues around what you're talking about today can be boiled down to individualism and collectivism, and how those are probably genetic? I don't think they're genetic, really. Individualism and collectivism. Uh, I don't. The only genetic side would be people who have a have a sociopathic personalities, um, who that are genetic, and whatever the source of that is somehow embedded in their DNA. That sociopathic meaning that they just don't care about the people around them. They're not thinking about it. They don't care. They're just completely self-absorbed. And that could be because maybe they're on the spectrum somewhere, right? Could be autistic or something like that. It doesn't mean that they're aggressive and angry, that kind of thing, or psychotic in some way. Um, or people who are just, for whatever reason, they have no boundaries for the same reason, right? That they're genetic, and for genetic reasons they have no boundaries, and they don't even feel the individualist orientation in themselves. They're just completely feel connected to other people around them. So I don't think any of that, but most of it's just sociological. It's how we grow up in the world. Tomorrow in class, I had a conversation last night with my friend Suman, from Korea, and we talked about the mourning period after the plane crash, and the Jeju Air plane crash at the end of the year. And so she talked about that mourning period. We had a conversation about it in Korea, and so we're going to show that in class, and then we're going to have a conversation about
You,
it.
you're gonna show the conversation about the morning, like the conversation on
Yeah,
mourning.
that Suman and I had. We had it with the intention that I would show it in class and show it on the
Wow.
live stream, right?
Wow.
And this is just
Like,
pure. Korea went into a week of mourning, man, like right away. Yeah, and it
wow.
just didn't. You didn't.
Is it like
eh, No, go ahead.
like how the conversation is like centered, like you want to show like how Korea or like this conversation is holding grief, like
Yeah, yeah. As a whole society, a whole nation held the grief, and
wow.
you can't have fun. Basically, and the government and the people agreed. It's like, you do not have fun for a week. You got 1 week where we're grieving. You
Wow.
wear dark clothing. All the humor is off. No television is showing any humor at all. YouTubers, whoever it is, there's no humor. Like, we're not laughing. You can laugh, but that's not what we're doing. We're not partying. You go to the bars. There's no big parties. Everybody's toning it down. New Year's Eve, bro. They went through New Year's Eve, toned down.
Wow,
A
that is
couple
so
party boats
interesting.
went out. A couple party boats went out on the Han River, and they shot fireworks off, and they drank, and woohoo, man! One company, they ceased operations for 6 months. They shut them down for 6 months. Yeah. So
Because of that.
yeah, yeah, you can
Wow.
do that. We're in grieving period now.
You know, that just reminded me a story about my childhood. Like the day that my mom passed, I remember my grandfather was my dad. We were gonna go play basketball, and this isn't
Yeah,
to take it away, but I remember we were gonna go play basketball, and he was like, "You're gonna go play basketball? Like you're gonna go have fun? Like
yeah,
you can't." He was like, "You can't." Like he didn't want me to play basketball, and me, I was like, "What are you talking about? Like I'm gonna go play basketball with my friends."
yeah,
You
yeah.
know? But that's wow, that just like brought me back to that. But that's
Well, that's big.
wow to hold like because the expectation when there's mourning to like be in this place of like reflection and that is without like a sense of like you can't let that's wow, that's like really profound
Well,
because I'm not sure
here,
how
I
I
got one.
feel about it. I'm not
So
sure how I feel
a
about
lot
it.
of Yeah, so a lot of people on the stream will know this. Axel knows, when there's a big thing in Germany, right? But on the stream, you remember 9/11, and it was a couple days, 3, 4 days, 5 days, like nothing happened, man. It was just like the shows were off the air. It was not there were no comedy shows. Everything just kind of ceased, right? So we did that was 9/11, but this is the only time I've ever seen it. Well, when Kennedy was assassinated, probably a similar kind of thing happened,
Yeah.
but it wasn't declared. We didn't declare that 9/11. The Challenger explosion, but that was very brief, very, very brief. Not like, and nobody called for that. Yeah. And yeah, no one called for it. But here, there's a whole nation, man. Whole nation. Everybody wearing dark clothing. In Challenger, for example, no one said we're all going to wear dark clothing. 9/11, no one said we're going to wear dark clothing. We're going to be no fun.
Yeah, like, because when you were saying, like earlier, you were saying, like when I'm holding all this stuff, like what gets me through it is like I need to laugh, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
but then in this, it's like there's the pressure, especially by society, it seems like to really hold that and just hold the grief. And I'm just
Yeah.
trying to, like, what do you think? What do you think was the not I don't want to say benefit because I don't think it's done for benefit. It's done out of like respect and reflection of life, right? And like because but some people
Well,
like other cultures will like celebrate life, right? Like even if
yeah.
something but
Yeah.
it's different because that's like cataclysmic. That's like a whole bunch of people, whether it was 9/11 or this plane
Yeah.
crash passing, all at once, which is like terrible.
Yeah.
And but that's I'm
Well,
just thinking about these different
it
ways and people
yeah, yeah, it bonds people together.
yeah.
It bonds us together, and we need, you want a strong society. You want to be able to rely on your neighbors. You want to feel connected to your neighbors. You want to feel connected to people across town, people in other cities, people in other states. You want to feel like you're a nation. So when the flag goes up, you have that moment. You go to a sports game, and we sing the national anthem before some big football game, right? So it's like it reminds me of this movie Slapshot. Do you know anything? You don't know that movie
I don't think
Slapshot.
so, but I feel like I've heard of it.
It's a hockey movie. All right, anybody on the stream, you're gonna remember Slapshot. I'll never forget. Like they were the one game they were it's just this crazy story about this kind of small town ice hockey team that they were just terrible, and they brought these three goons in, and they just were fighting all the time. But there's this one game, and they even before the game started, they were in brawling. All the teams are just brawling, and then they got them stopped, and they were singing the national anthem, and they're all lined up.
Uh-huh.
before it starts, right? National, and they're all bleeding and stuff, but they're all like this. They stop fighting for
Yeah,
a
yeah,
moment, and so that's what that does for
yeah.
us, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like it has to be or like, based off of my observation when I hear like, oh, celebrate like some people when death happens, like they celebrate or like they appreciate the death or the life that was experienced. It's like
Yeah.
either or it's like one unifying emotion, right? Because like
Yeah, that's
whether it's
right.
like it
Yeah,
seems like
that's right.
and if you're outside of that emotion that the rest are feeling, you're kind of not in that place of like
Yeah.
bonding or
Yeah,
um
that's right. Yeah, and again, so Scott Shapiro and Michael W. Right. So the 9/11 was profound, man. People who were far very critical of the United States and U.S. policies and nonetheless put flags up. People were so. It was just a people weren't fighting the drivers. There's no like honking your horn at people. It was just several days of kind behavior. Now I wasn't in a city, but 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 I talked to lots of people in cities, New York, wherever. It's like people were really, really very kind toward one another. It was such a huge thing, right? And I don't. That's the only time that we've ever had this. Well, Korea has it on places like Korea have it on a fairly, I wouldn't say regular basis, but it's quite pretty common, and the whole nation does it, man. And you're watching everybody else, and you're going to see if you when you watch this interview with Suman tomorrow. It's like you're watching everybody else. It's like, wait, you're over there, you're at a coffee shop, and you're laughing, and like, and I'm sitting here, and like my eyes look at you, like, wait, who's laughing over there, right? And you're aware of this feeling, all these eyes are on you at some level, and that's like, man, that's kind of that's big. We're telling each other that these things matter. Yeah, a tone shift, and yeah,
it's profound.
yeah, it's pretty profound. And so think about this tragedy that happened, the airplane crash, with the
Two
crash
of
in the
them,
helicopter a week ago. Yeah.
right? Were there two?
Well,
Or
I'm just
within
thinking
a
of the
few weeks?
helicopter and the airplane crash, right? And
Okay,
within
okay.
hours, it was being politicized. It's like, whoa, 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 man, like that, and so that wasn't, yeah, it's different. Now, mind you, that's not to say that uh, that's not this. Yeah, well, whatever. That's what it is, right? So, and that's not saying that therefore, Korea is a better culture than ours or whatever, more advanced, more something. It's not to say that. It's just to say it's different, and
Does it does
there
it
are a
like
lot of.
make us does it make us less connected, or would you just say we're connected in different ways, or
I see.
just it's just different?
Huh, that's interesting. We're connected in different ways. And we're nonetheless very connected here, given how different we are. Korea is a very monocultural world, and it's a very monocultural culture. It's only like 3% of the population is foreign born. So,
Right,
it's a lot easier to have that. That
right.
your neighbors, you assume they're all doing the same thing. And there's only a fair number of, since there's so few foreigners, the foreigners are all watching to see what the Koreans are doing, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
You, would
Yeah.
would you say there's more? Maybe that doesn't have to be like that. I'm not trying to make it like more or less or whatever, but
Yeah.
it feels like there's more empathy in Korea than or
Well,
compassion.
yeah, well, I don't know. Well, you don't know that. You'd have to really sit down and have individual conversations with Koreans, because a lot of them are doing it just because they have to,
Because of the conformity,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The expectation, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. So Patrick, I would say that a similar thing. And I say each day, as much as I'm try not to, I'm feeling increasingly dis for me, I don't like it, but I'm struggling to feel really connected right now. I mean, I know I talk like I'm really connected, but deep down, I'm concerned, like of this nation, right? I'm concerned. I think there are these divisions that are they're they're the crevices are growing a little further than I think is safe for us as a nation. Um, I think the world is we're divided in some ways. Things are changing drastically. Various whether it's just trade policies or it doesn't really matter. Like there's so many things, and I feel like man, I want to stay really, really connected. But the fact is, I'm kind of turning back into myself in these ways that I'm not really happy about, but I'm trying to figure it out. You
Yeah.
know, uh,
So yeah,
it's
like the division or is making you feel isolated. Like you don't like you feel like where you're standing feels like it's in different places from where like your society is.
yeah, maybe, but a lot of it is just talk. If I stay away from the news and I don't listen to it and I don't pay attention and uh, in the news works. It's everything is clickbait, right? So, and we know that if you get people angry, they're more likely to keep clicking. It's almost like we're these like rats in a cage and we keep hitting the button and after some I don't know. We do just do that. So I don't do that, but I know that
Yeah.
it's part and parcel of this, and so I'm working it really hard. Uh, yeah, I'm working it hard, trying to keep it. Oh, the Hanson brothers, man. You really just look up some stuff it's called Slapshot, Elijah. You can go on YouTube and you can see some clips from the film. It's just really
Yeah.
the Hanson brothers, man.
Have you ever
When they
seen
first turn them loose, when they first Paul Newman is the coach, right? And he turns them loose on the ice in this game. Okay, guys, let's see what you got. And it's just so I mean, it's a boys thing, I mean, I
Yeah,
was like, I don't know what I was,
it's a
17
comedy though,
years
right?
old. It's a comedy, but
Have you ever seen like Kicking and Screaming with Will
no.
Ferrell
Mm.
and like he goes against his dad who's like Robert De Niro. Like um I think it's Robert De Niro. I might be wrong, but it sounds like very similar,
Yeah,
like this
something. All right, I'm
funny
gonna put that
sports.
down. Although I don't watch.
Yeah, Kicking
Yeah,
and Screaming. It's kind of my dad loves that movie.
yeah. It's just like there are these movies that when you're a kid. There we go. Yeah, it's like oh man. Yeah.
I'll have to check
Oh
it out.
man. All right, listen. Do we anyway, listen. Are there any more questions from yesterday, Jeff? Or Elijah? Are there questions from yesterday? Yeah.
I posted some YouTube comments that are from yesterday,
All
but
right.
Jeff might have some questions as well.
How does discrimination present itself in other countries? Like, yeah, there's a lot of discrimination in Japan, definitely against foreigners. Uh,
Oh, really?
in Saudi Arabia, it's a little bit different. There's just so many. In the Gulf countries, there's such a distinction between foreign worker. First off, you have your expats who are in the Gulf countries, who are people like me, who are there as professionals, and we're doing jobs as professionals. That the level of
Expats?
discrimination, expats, yeah, like people who are like who have kind of left their country and they moved somewhere else, right? Expatriates. So
Okay.
but there are there's the professionals at that level, but then there's the skilled workers, but uneducated skilled. I mean, the army of the proletariat, as Karl Marx called them, and they're the ones that are doing all the heavy lifting, and they experience a lot of discrimination. Yeah, and they don't
Really?
have the economic means to not do that. I can be in, when I'm in the Gulf, people know that I'm a professional, right? So it's like they know I'm not there to build the subway system in Qatar or to build buildings or hotels or whatever, right? So anyway,
Um,
and
like the
in
everyday
Russia,
construction worker or
yeah,
like,
Yeah, yeah, and in Russia, it's similar. The workers, it's foreign workers are exploited everywhere. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Josie, where are you, Josie? Where are you as an expat? Um, yeah,
So,
yeah.
do you think there's
Mm.
like what if it's someone who's doing like the hard labor work and they're not a foreigner? Do they experience that same discrimination, or is it
Not,
only if you're
no one in the Gulf. That doesn't happen, man. There's nobody doing that. Like the Saudis and the Qataris and the Emiratis. It's like, no.
you're
You
not
can be
doing
you
hard
can be
labor?
born there, but like in Qatar, you can't be. It doesn't matter. Like you can be in Qatar and you can have a kid. You can be, your child is not Qatari. There's not so in the UK. Yeah. So, it's just one of those things. Yeah. So we see discrimination all over the world. Anyway, that's my answer to that question. It looks a little bit different everywhere, but it's there. You know. All right. What's another question we have from yesterday? Uh, if human nature is to have in-group preferences, is is it only a bad thing when the in-group is in power? Huh? Yeah. Well, it's only considered a bad thing. Yeah, that's right. So it's like the in-group. Well, no. Now we see but people get offended if Black Americans or Native Americans or Chicano or Hispanic Mexican Americans, let's say, if they decide, hey, we're going to do this little thing here, we don't want any white people involved, we don't want anyone in the dominant group involved, we're going to do it, this is just our thing. Someone in the dominant group's always going to stand up and be like, hey, you're discriminating against me, like, why don't you, can't do that. Like, well, hang on, so it no, it's not always. Truthfully, it is, but it's not always a bad thing. Yeah, it's mostly the group in power. It's called racism or sexism or whatever. We
So
don't
just
call it when women discriminate against men. We don't call it. That's generally not viewed as sexism. Not to say that that's correct, but the idea of sexism emerged around the unequal treatment of women. And so therefore it's just deeply embedded in consciousness to equate sexism with men unequally treating women unequally. So right, so you have to work to flip it around and be like, no, 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 women in these environments can act in sexist ways against men, right? But that's generally not. We this is where racism and sexism, it's the act plus power. And this is what, Black people are, started saying, 2 decades ago. It's like it's 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 racism plus power. Like, that's the thing. But that's not to say, I'm just saying that that's how we generally see it. So does that make sense, Elijah?
yeah, to me, I was also thinking is like act, like clap power plus the act plus like
Yeah.
exclusivity. Because
Hmm.
when he asked the question, he asked about like, is it power? I was like, okay, if
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
power, is it a form of just unjust exclusivity?
yeah, yeah,
Like a
yeah.
perceived unjust exclusivity? Like,
Yeah, yeah, I
or
should say that. But mostly people don't think hard about it. They just throw the words, and I think that we forget, like, people say, "Oh, well, racial minorities can be racist against white people." Yeah, okay, they can, right? We're there now, right? But for
mm,
sure. But understand that certain terms emerged in reference to certain groups, groups that historically had power against or over other groups. And so once we start using the terms in that way, then they kind of stick, but it doesn't mean we can't loosen up the term and use it in other ways. So we can readily refer to sexism that men experience. Like, okay, mind you, there's a hell of a lot less of it, but it's also very
sexism
complicated,
against
right?
men.
Yeah, but men, we're taught to be, those of us who are paying attention, we're taught to see ourselves in this kind of, in certain ways that really isn't even good for us, right? Or we're taught even to be macho, like being macho is a good thing. Well, that's a kind of a sexism, I would say, as a sociologist. Like, what are you going to be macho for? Like, but we're largely teaching that to ourselves. So it's a bunch of nonsense, and then at the same time, it's a good thing, right? When we had
Uh-huh.
that ice storm, and like Lori and I watched all these men come and in their macho-ness, you know what I mean? Like because that's who they are, man. And they're coming and they're fixing the power lines and stuff at 3 in the morning, and like there's just that maleness, man. Just like boom, like well, that's a good thing then. Good thing you feel that makes you feel more like better that you've been socialized and truly you feel more of a man and more. It's like, fuck, I love it. Come fix my power at 3 in the morning. It's like,
In the presence of men that were um that were like projecting you as like not macho enough, or like
what?
have you ever been in the presence of men like throughout
Yeah.
your experience in life where you weren't macho enough for them?
Yeah, but not very often. But
Got it.
because, I grew up in the working class. So, like,
Mhm.
I know how to blend in with that
Got it.
kind of. I mean,
Okay.
people can see me and think certain things, but the truth is, I can just by the way I stand and my
Uh-huh.
demeanor and my comportment, I can go
Mhm.
right back into that. Even though I
Right.
was never very macho. I mean, I
Yeah.
played football, I played sports, I played everything, but truthfully, I wasn't really macho in the deepest way, but I can go there
Okay.
if
Mhm.
you wouldn't necessarily know it. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I've, okay. Okay.
Do we
It was
have have you how about you? Have you been in the presence of how often you
yeah,
in the
well,
presence of you're not
I was
macho
thinking
enough?
about a story for myself, but I was like, let me just ask Sam if he's experienced it, because I just didn't want to go into the story. But yeah, when I was in sales and I would when I was in wine sales, and so I would like dress up like as a salesperson, right? Like business casual, and you have to like dress nice. But I'm going into grocery stores, you know? And
Yeah,
like me personally, like I loved like vibing with the common man, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
rather than like the fancy dinners that I'd have to go to and like the corporate events, like I honestly hated that stuff. But like when I would just do my work and like go to the grocery store and talk to the managers there and like vibe with the guys that are putting stuff on the shelf, like that was cool. But there were some managers or like people that I'd have to report to sell stuff,
yeah,
that I felt like would view me and they're like, who's this kid looking like,
yeah,
with his polo on and his nice pants. And even though like I was helping, like I did demolition work, I did landscaping,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I did all kinds of like tough labor jobs growing up, and I was always willing to get in the dirt. But like when they like view me as I go into the grocery store, there was times where I felt like I was noticing certain biases. Like if there was a like a beer guy that came in, he looked more like a beer dude, that like
yeah,
he
yeah,
would get different treatment than like, or
yeah,
I would get different treatment than that guy. And I always wondered if
yeah.
it's like, oh, they just think I'm this,
And they
kid.
definitely thought you were that. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, man. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's really funny. Yeah,
Mm.
it depends on
Is
where
he
you're at.
just
It's like,
right?
it's so funny.
And it
All
was
right,
like New
listen, man.
England too, so it was like
No, yeah, you
New
gotta
New
mingle, and
England
it's a lot
vibe.
easier to mingle if you're not wearing khakis and a polo. If you're dressed like other people are dressed, you know.
Yeah, and there's the
Yeah,
expectation of the business to want you to dress like that going in
yeah,
there, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Because you're selling wine, right? You're not selling beer. Yeah,
Yeah, right. I
it's
wasn't a
like
beer guy.
that's really funny. Okay, is there another comment or question? It's pretty simple. As long as there are different groups with different cultures and people will notice these differences and pass judgment. Yep, that's true. We can try to train people to have discretion. Yep, that's true. And to see the individual rather than the group. Yep. Unfortunately, we're doing a very poor job of it right now to expect discrimination to only get. No, I don't. I actually don't think we're doing such a poor job. I think that I think we've pushed the envelope of treat everybody equal, like stop seeing differences, stop, like I think you push that. I think we don't we should, if we could just say thoughtfully, yeah, this is part of the human experience. Do your best, but understand it's part of the human experience. Here are some of the places where you might fail. You might not do your best. Okay, that's why if you take a sociology class like Social 19, you can have an opportunity to explore that without getting beaten over the head. Like you're such a jerk. And I think that's what I'm trying to do all the time. Is just like, hey, here, just look at this. Look at this. It's good. Like if I could take if you went to a place like Haiti with me, and Jeff knows this because Jeff was in Haiti with me and with Lori. And when you go to a place like that and you experience the absolute dignity of people, like wow, the poorest, so poor, but yet the dignity of people, and you just feel like you can feel like you're a better person than who you are. And then you want to rise up to it, and you challenge yourself to not see Haitians through this very narrow lens, but rather see Haitians in a much more complex way, like the kaleidoscope kind of thing. But you have to practice it, and you have to do it, and you often have to have someone show you how to do it.
Mm.
Uh,
Like practicing to get like practicing humanization in a
yeah,
way. Like,
humanization. Yeah, and practicing where you mess up and where you don't get it right, and and that's what it is. So
yeah.
yeah,
How do you suggest people
yeah,
practice humanization? Would you say like exposure or like even exposure, you can still have a lens without a kaleidoscope. So it's like,
yeah.
is it practicing empathy? What's your five-step method to practicing humanization, Sam? Uh, just being,
I think just engaging in deep conversation with people, right?
Mhm.
Hey, wait, I want to go back to a question, Jeff, or cats. Uh, I'm wondering what you're saying there. I'm curious about it. Uh, okay. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question, Elijah, really. It's just something I've been
No, I'm
thinking
just
whole life. It's really good though. But you do a good job of it. Yeah, I got one. You were an Uber driver, and the guy, this guy who's clearly an alcoholic, he's strung out. He's
yeah,
knocking on your window and he's asking you for a couple bucks, and you get out of your car and you start talking to him. That's what it is right there, man. The woman that you pick up, she's a prostitute. She's coming home from a job, and you're asking her how she's doing. How good? I'm worried about my kid. Oh, how's your kid? And you're talking to her like you would talk to anybody,
yeah,
and you engage and you're curious about her, and that's how you do it right
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah. And you
Just
just get better and better at it.
just
Yeah.
take that because there were moments where um I guess because it was bringing me back to risk again,
Yeah.
like taking the risk of like not knowing and having the faith that people are good. Like
Yeah.
you said that before, like have the faith that people are good, like rather than um,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
People are the same all over the world. They
yeah, yeah,
basically are, man. And
hmm
yeah. And I
yeah,
think like with Jeff's comment about Haitians, one of the most judged groups, man. No one thinks of Haiti. If you've not been to Haiti, no one thinks of Haiti and thinks like, oh, these are really interesting people. Like you just don't think that. But you go to Haiti, very few people leave Haiti and they're not blown away. That's one of the common things about people that go to Haiti, and you're going like, oh man, whoa, that was utterly fascinating. These people, Haitians, are so interesting.
like, people don't
Yeah.
walk away with that.
Yeah, no, they do walk away with
They
that.
do,
Everybody
they do.
does. That's the
Oh, okay,
common
okay.
thing about Haiti, man, is everybody walks away going like, "Damn, that was just not these Haitians are not what I thought. The island, the culture, the people. It's like, yeah, it's poor, but it's like you see past it.
Wow,
Man, yeah. Huh.
it's so cool.
Anyway,
It's amazing.
anyway, all right, I'm gonna have to go pretty quickly. Is there a final comment or question, Jeff, that we should or Elijah, the one that you have? I don't know, Jeff. salty mac and cheese at the retail, and War on Cops absolutely destroyed the myth that black people are pulled over for no reason. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in that you I think I said it in class. I mean, we know that. Well, hang on, but I'm going to respond to that. No, there is uh, there is discrimination and racism is in play. The question is, how much is it in play with the police, right? That's the question. How much is it in play? And there's a whole narrative that it's happening all the time and it's everywhere, and it's like it's the nature of the police. And then there's a narrative that says, no, it's happening, but we really need to understand the places and so on. And
Mm,
yeah, so that's the thing. And if you don't study, if you don't read it and you study it and you really, it's if you're weighing in on it, you're weighing in on something that you just really don't know anything about.
mm.
So yeah, yeah, I think that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on where you are and who you are, and the police are very different in different communities. In our community, it's the police, like it's the students, man. We're trying to keep them in line, man. They get drunk, they get rowdy, they get crazy, and you come down, man. You're in this town on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night between 11 and 3 in the morning, and it's a crazy place, and you can become very anti-student very quickly.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
And I think if more parents who send their kids off to a place like Penn State came and walked around downtown in those hours, they'd be pretty shocked. Yeah, yeah, it's
it-
it's pretty.
it's
Yeah,
it's funny too. Like I think with my Uber drives, or like sometimes I think I heard uh some parents are like in the mix, like on.
yeah, 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 yeah. Chicken pork adobo. I would recommend that. I always think it's good for people to experience things that are go to rich countries, right? Like I have my American students who think they're really privileged and they've never been around rich people. I'm like, yo, man, God, dude. They're from like the middle class or something. Like, yeah, well, I'm so privileged. I'm like, dude, you never even been around rich people, man. You have no idea what you're talking about. Rich countries, rich people, rich whatever. It's like, man, you need a wake up right there.
Like when Jake yesterday was like, "I'm blessed." When he said
Yeah.
that, he was like,
Yeah, well,
he's like, "I'm
Jake's,
blessed." Yeah.
he's just blessed. I could tell by his demeanor, man. He has a positive outlook on life. He's a nice kid. I can tell immediately. He's just a nice guy.
Yeah.
Uh, nice demeanor. He's from the, upper middle class. He's like, yeah, it's fine. He's healthy. It was as far as I know. I mean, he didn't say anything, but he is
Right.
very
Right.
blessed. And many of us are blessed. Even people who are poor are blessed. It's all relative. All right, listen, we should go, man. Uh, anyway, yeah, we should go. I gotta go. So, Elijah, keep rocking and rolling. Jeff,
Sir.
thanks. Uh, thanks everybody
Thanks.
for hopping on and talking. It's good. Uh, yeah, appreciate it. And class should be interesting tomorrow. It'll be different. We're going in a totally different direction. Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Let's get it.
Be well. Be